So basically what I wanted to ask you first, Mike, was how did you first get into Seido, or what was your first what were your beginnings before you became a professional fighter?
Okay, well, way back in when I was 12, back in, when was that, 1983, all three of my older brothers got into Seido karate before me. My oldest brother actually started it when it was still Kyokushin. The Seido name hadn't actually evolved when he first got into it. And it was just a family progression. You know, they did it, and I said, "Oh, that looks all right." I went along there and tried it, and just really loved it from the start, and got right into it.
So was that with Renzi?
No, I trained originally down in Dunedin under, first of all, it was Sensei Ben Otang, who now runs the club in Wellington. And when he moved away, it was a man named Kevin Penty. He ran the club in Dunedin. And that's where I trained from when I was 12 to when I was about 20, when I moved away to Motueka. And there was a branch in Motueka, and I just continued training up there.
So what grade did you leave Dunedin as?
I was a Shodan, first dan when I left Dunedin.
Yeah.
And I got that in 1998. And then when I moved to Nelson, or Motueka, Nelson was the main branch. There was Shehan Andy Barber. He was the head guy there. Yeah, I promoted to Nidan and to Sandan while I lived in Nelson. And then moved to Wellington after being in Nelson, or Motueka. Moved to Nelson, Wellington to university. Was there for 4 years in Wellington and trained there in Seido, and that's where I started kickboxing when I was in... Actually, no, that's not true. I started kickboxing when I was in Motueka, actually, as something extra to do.
So, from what I know, did you do a bit of instructing in Motueka as well?
Yeah. Well, we always had annual tournaments for either full contact or point sparring tournaments in Seido karate. And there wasn't anybody there in the Motueka branch that had much experience, and I had a lot of experience being in a lot of tournaments, both in Dunedin and in Motueka. So I basically took a tournament squad each year when the annual tournament came around, and you probably know a lot about the sort of the traditional karate sort of organisation. There's always people wanting to train up, and there's always gradings and stuff to go for, and so I did a bit of instructing up there.
So when you went to Wellington, at what point did you break away from Seido and go to a pure kickboxing gym?
I never actually broke away from Seido. I still continued to train there. I just did kickboxing as well. The University of Wellington had its own kickboxing club. Okay. And I trained Seido karate sort of 3 times a week and kickboxing 3 times a week. And mixed them both. And I still did karate tournaments as well as doing kickboxing tournaments. So I did it. The only time I stopped doing Seido was actually when I moved to Melbourne. Although they had a Seido club in Melbourne, they had another one in Geelong. It was about an hour and a half's drive away from where I moved to, and it was very different to what I was used to. The way the Seido in Melbourne in this particular branch run, it was a lot more modern. It was a lot more, I wouldn't say soft, but it wasn't very traditional. Stand there, you can't move, and that traditional martial arts that I was really used to. So being a long way away and not fulfilling my own needs for karate at the time, I just said, no, that's it. I'll just go and try and find something else. And the funny thing is, I'd been in a couple of Kyokushin tournaments, one in the New Zealand Kyokushin Open, and I went to London and done the British Kyokushin Championships as well. And I thought, I'll see if there's any Kyokushin dojos close. And I was actually on my way to a Kyokushin dojo and happened to be passing a kickboxing studio. And I just, I'll just pop in there and see what it's like. So I popped in there, and that was Malvern Martial Arts, where Nick Carrer and Ron Parr were running it at the time. And just by chance, I joined in there, and they said, there's a class in an hour. I went back, and that was it. That was where I ended up training for the next sort of 4 years full time. So it was a bit of sliding doors sort of moment.
Yeah, I think that's your story is very different, because your move to kickboxing, it was by chance, and what you just mentioned. So, but do you feel like, how do you feel like your karate background has helped you as a fighter?
Well, the karate background for a start just gave me the love of just getting in there and getting fit and just pushing yourself. And, you know, it's not always about the fighting part of it in karate. You've got all the other aspects of it. So there's that part of it, just the love of pushing yourself to the limit and training and getting extremely fit. And the other aspect of it was just the sense of knowing how to move your body a certain way. So learning how to punch in a boxing scenario or do a push kick in a kickboxing or a Muay Thai sort of situation, although they're technically a bit different to karate, just knowing that you know how to train your body and your kinesthetic senses are all in tune, and learning how to do different strikes and stuff, that all was much easier in kickboxing for me because I had that background of really knowing how to move. So that was two major things there.
Yeah, because I think one thing that I observed from watching you fight when I was growing up is your distance and timing was very good. So
Yeah.
would you attribute that to a lot of your karate background?
Well, it's a lot different in karate, obviously, because we not normally, apart from the occasional points tournament, we're not allowed to punch to the head. So
Yeah.
You had to be a bit further away to allow for the kicking space. So that made it, being out of range of the kicks a lot, that helped in that situation. But apart from that, it was really, I was a big student of whatever I was into. So for the movement for kickboxing, I really studied that a lot, and I really watched a lot of videos on how to move your feet. We did a lot of footwork sort of training in karate as well. So really, the whole package sort of helped and worked together.
Because I think, one thing that I really observed is obviously I look after a lot of Aussie fighters who I get to Japan.
Yep.
And as you know, in K1, you're not allowed to clinch. But one thing that I found from watching you fight, you were real good with your gamesmanship. You were able to fight within the rules, and you were able to, I wouldn't call it a clinch because it's not a Thai clinch, but you were able to, clinch to a degree and use your knees. Like your fight with Mike Zambidis was a perfect example.
Yeah. No, that's right. And I really took to the full Muay Thai clinch and just the clinches in some tournaments where it was a 1 second clinch or a one strike clinch, things like that. I really took to that, and I just was lucky enough that when I went to Wellington, the instructor there was really, really big on proper Muay Thai clinches. And we just drilled it. We had to be in the circle, and you'd have 8 guys coming in fresh every minute, getting your head down and just tossing you around and doing all that Muay Thai type stuff. And so that really just made a huge strength gain in that area too. So that was, again, just a lucky, I could have gone to another gym and it could have been completely different. It could have been very kickboxing orientated as opposed to Muay Thai orientated. So yeah, I still enjoyed that part of it.
So at what point did you start training under Lolo?
I fought under Lolo a couple of times. I didn't actually train under him. I fought under a couple of his tournaments when Andre Minart fought Lolo's top guy. Name eludes me at the moment. And I met Lucy Tui up there at the same time as well when I fought up there. So I fought in Auckland a couple of times. And they were, I look back in those times with great memories going up to Auckland and stuff like that. It was always fun.
Yeah, because Lolo's, as you know, he's a household name over here.
Yeah.
And Lucy as well. She, I know they managed and looked after Peter Graham as well.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, good. Yeah. No. So they were always good times. I've got some funny stories about when I went up and fought in Auckland the first time.
Yeah.
We're getting ready for the weigh-in, and all these guys were doing push-ups and stuff like that, pumping themselves up before they took their shirts off for the weigh-in, and I just looked around and thought, oh, this is pretty funny, and then went, oh no, I forgot my tattoo. And all these tattooed boys swung around and go, who's this skinny little white fella? He's bloody, he's just standing over in the corner there making jokes. But, that was good times. It was pretty funny.
Yeah. So obviously like your style. How did your nickname come about, or your fight name, Machine Gun?
I thought of that because I liked my very first nickname. I just thought it rolled off the tongue easily, and I was trying to develop my punching a lot more because I was usually a strong kicker. So I tried to develop the punches a lot more, and I thought, oh, if I punched like a machine gun, it'd work out well. So really, I just sort of thought about it. I changed it a few times, but it's pretty funny.
So from your record, like your actual, because you did professional boxing as well, and that's what I guess makes you different to a lot of guys coming from a karate background. Yours is kind of similar to Peter Graham, where you've done well in every single discipline that you've done.
Yeah. I just sort of, I got to the stage, well, actually, I started doing a little bit of UFC way back under a gentleman that trained at our club called Jeremy Takoti. He was a very strong UFC background, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu traditionalist. Just before I ended up stopping kickboxing altogether, but the reason I got into boxing was I just started getting lower back stress fractures from hyperextending my knees all the time, because I was always trying to be very powerful with my knees, which involved a lot of throwing your hips forward. So I started getting niggles and being in pain, and it's painful enough getting whacked and getting cracked ribs and broken noses and stuff. I didn't want to have injuries, skeletal injuries. So I went, I was working full time, and I didn't really want to start suffering injuries long term. So I thought I would do boxing instead. So I chucked in all of the kicking and just went to boxing, just for a preservation of my own body sort of scenario. Unfortunately, I couldn't do any amateur boxing because I'd been registered as a professional fighter in Victoria. So I sort of got thrown in the deep end there, and didn't have too many fights. I think there's 7 fights or something like that. I can't really remember. And wasn't terribly outstanding in the boxing scenario. And then, unfortunately, just from the repetitive boxing only, I started getting stress fractures in my hands. And after I fought John Wayne Parr, he unfortunately knocked me out in the first round. I just think, you know what? I've had my fun. I've had my fun in this. I was working and wanted to start a family, and just went, I'll just have enough. Throw it in. Just lost the spark, really, at that stage.
Yeah. So after that point, so were you a teacher for most of the time you were fighting?
No, in New Zealand, I was training to be a teacher, working part-time. When I moved to Australia, my wife got a full-time teaching job, and I had to work full-time. There was no unemployment benefit or anything like that. And from the moment we moved to Australia at the start of 1999, I guess we got a full-time job, worked for a factory, and worked in the office for a factory. I never actually trained to be a teacher. I had a university degree for Wellington, but I never trained to be a teacher until 2008. So I actually finished fighting for 4 years before I became a teacher. Went to teachers college for 1 year because I just had to do a postgraduate diploma, and then started teaching full-time in 2009 after a year at university. So at that stage now I'd finished fighting for 4 years.
So in your last year, like after that fight with John Wayne Parr, was there any particular reason why you didn't think of, okay, maybe I'll do coaching, or?
I coached a bit off and on, both in not in any serious capacity, but just a lot of the time over the years in karate, and a little bit in kickboxing as well in New Zealand. And when I moved here, I was fully involved. All my efforts, because I was working, all my efforts had to go into the training aspect. I didn't really have the time to be able to do any coaching. You'd go in after work, it'd be 6 o'clock. You'd go into training at 6:30. You'd spend a couple of hours, do that 4 or 5 times a week. And the weekends, you'd go for runs and stuff. So I had no energy to do any of the helping other people out. And then when I stopped fighting, it wasn't a conscious decision to think about doing it or think about not doing it. I really just thought, I've just had my time doing it. I didn't feel like I owed to put back into it. I just enjoyed I actually still enjoyed competing sport-wise. I took up triathlons for a couple of years and competed. I did those. I trained up for the Melbourne Marathon. I did a few other big runs around the area, and then I took up did mountain bike racing and lots of things like that in the time after it. So I still wanted to just train for myself, although it wasn't in the fight game. I still wanted to keep fit and do things that I enjoyed that wasn't going to injure me too much. And the main aspect of it was just the night times. It was always at night. We'd started to try and have a family not long after I retired. I certainly didn't want to be out at night with a young family. So it was really just, I was never drawn to actually teaching as far as kickboxing is concerned. It was just didn't really appeal to me.
Yeah, and that's fair enough because everyone's I guess different in that regard. But do you still keep in contact with a lot of your friends from those days? Well, Troy being
definitely Troy, but I'm a fairly sort of isolated, sort of insular person naturally. I'm not really a big social aspect sort of person, so I don't really keep in contact with a lot of people back from those days. It's really just it's not a conscious decision to avoid anything or to go and seek anything. I just sort of let things flow along as they are. I've got my life here that is good. I've got my own family and stuff, and really it's it's just trucking on with what I've got to do here, really.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Everyone's got their thing. But if you could name like a few of your memorable fights, like from your career, are there any of your fights that kind of make you think, oh, that was a battle, or any memorable ones for you?
The ones I've seen on YouTube are certainly memorable. There's one with Ethan. There's another one with Mike Zambidis on YouTube. There's a good one with a Turkish guy I fought here as well.
I watched that one. Yeah, I know.
There's a couple of those ones are quite memorable, but my really strong memories of fighting and being really proud of myself, that was actually doing the New Zealand Kyokushin Open back in, I think it was 1997. I went into that tournament because that was just a real battle. No pads, 4 fights in one day, all just knockout tournaments and stuff. And at the end of that particular tournament, I actually fought in the final like a bloke who had only had one fight during the day because he had 2 people withdraw, and I'd gone through every round, and I still managed to head kick upon to win the fight in the extension. So that was one of my most favourite sort of memories of fighting. Also getting around, going to Noumea a couple of times to fight there, going to Thailand. Going up to Darwin, just all that sort of general sort of getting around and fighting stuff, that was all pretty good.
Yeah, so I guess you've been able to do that thing and travel around. Did you ever come across anyone from Seido or karate who you ever thought maybe they should try kickboxing? Or
I actually trained one lady when I lived in Motueka who was very good at that. She was in Seido karate, and she wanted to do some kickboxing. She was sort of influenced by me. I trained her up. There's probably plenty that would be able to make the transition fairly easily, but they're the sort of the top fighters in Seido, or the top fighters anyway, so they're already a little similar to me in that respect. They've got a good understanding of what it takes to train and how to move the body and things like that. So there's probably a fair sprinkling. I'd never approached anybody about it though. It wasn't that it was a bad thing to do it if you're in karate, but it wasn't recommended that you go and do another martial art whilst you were doing karate at the time, back in the sort of the 80s and 90s and stuff like that. So
cross training was a bit frowned upon back in the day, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's a lot different now. Everyone's a lot more open and things like that. But so I sort of kept it pretty quiet at the start anyway, which was fine. That's just what it is.
Yeah. So when you got into the kickboxing, did you have any particular goal in mind? Like, did you ever think, okay, maybe I want to beat that guy and knock him out, or was it just kind of all happen for you?
No, because I don't know if it's because of the karate or just because of the way I was. Everything was just the moment, you know. If it was, it was just being in the moment at the time. If it was training, it was just doing the next push up. It was doing the next knee on the bag. It was doing the next 10 reps. It was whatever the case may be. So in fighting, it was just okay. This is the fight I'm in at the moment, and it was always just right in the moment. I never thought, oh, you know, I'd like to be world champ, or I'd like to beat this guy, or I'd like to go to Japan and fight. I never thought anything like that ever. It was always, okay, this is the next time, this is the next fight, this is the next mission, that was it. So it was, yeah, I never had any ambitions in it. I never had any goals that I wanted to set apart from just always training my best and always fighting my best wherever that may have been, really. That was always my attitude to it.
Yeah, that's real interesting talking to you because you know, a lot of my friends in the fight scene now, they all say, you know, I want to be UFC champion or this and that. And I think when you come from that karate background or a traditional martial art background, you're always encouraged to focus on what's in front of you.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, rather than, you know, it's always that first fight that you got to focus on.
Yeah. I mean, I can certainly understand people that want these aspirations and they see I don't know if it's the limelight or if it's the challenge of getting to the top of the mountain, but for most people that I've seen that think like that, they're not dedicated enough to train in the moment. You know, you've got to have both. You've got to know your end goal, but you've got to be super focused on what your next immediate goal is. If it's your next workout, if it's your next, you know, even just your next kick on the bag. You know, now I do a bit of mountain biking and I do some like Les Mills grit workouts and stuff like that just to try and keep fit. And even then, I'm always still thinking, am I moving my body the right way? You know, is that the best push up I can do? Is that the best tuck jump I can do? So, you know, if you've got to think like that and then have the underlying goals of, oh, maybe I might reach something else later on if I'm good enough. But yeah, definitely need to have the focus on the now. Absolutely.
And when you went to fight, like, you know, for example, when you fought Ethan Shepp that time in Auckland, when you used to go into the ring, did you have any thought, or were you just present at that time?
I didn't know much about. I was never a student of the game, so to speak. Like always looking at clips and trying to find videos and seeing people's records and what they did and what they didn't. I never did any of that at all. I was always just, okay, well, this is the guy in front of me right now. I had the advantage in New Zealand because I was only working part-time. I always felt better fighting in New Zealand than I did when I moved to Australia because I could always train harder in New Zealand. I didn't have to have the extra energy of going to work and things like that. So when I fought people like Ethan and even Mike Rickson, which was my third fight, and it was for a national title, I didn't know anything about him. I was always really, really fit. I always trained twice a day. I'd go to the gym in the mornings and smash myself and then go to university or something during the day and then just smash myself at nights again. So I always had the confidence that I was really fit. So then when I went into fights like against Ethan, I just always went balls out and just tried to hammer it from the word go and just wear the person out, just try and keep hitting them and just never take a backward step. That was just always my philosophy when I was fighting in New Zealand. And it worked pretty well most of the time.
Well, that was your style from what I saw from that fight. And a lot of the fights that you had you were always attacking. Like, you never had a boring fight from, you know, what I could see.
No, I didn't never like standing still. You know, it was either I'm attacking them or they're attacking me. And then as soon as they stop attacking me, I'll whack them again. That was just a result of just all the hard training I'd done. When I moved to Australia, I couldn't train as hard as that because I had to run before work and then try and really pull out all stops. So it ended up being a little bit harder for me to do that. And I didn't adapt that well. My record started to go downhill a bit in Australia, and you know I found it much harder. Although ironically, when I had my very last fight against John Wayne Parr, actually that was one of the best I'd felt before a fight. as far as fitness and technique's concerned for a long time, because I was just boxing only. So I was quite surprised, not that I'd lost, but then when I'd finished that fight, the spark just went out of me and just went, I just don't want to do it anymore. Because, but it was just things changed, and I couldn't train as hard, and it was all right.
And how important do you think it is to be, extremely fit to fight the style that you fought?
That was the only way I could fight the way I fought, because and I had a good endurance base from all of the karate aspect of it, where you've got some gradings take 2 hours, so you've got a long endurance base built into me, and then just doing the sprint work and everything like that. I always trained the way I wanted to fight. I was doing sprints up my driveway before every fight, and it was always just a 3-minute sprint up and back, just all the time. That's how I always approached it. It was the only way. I didn't worry too much about the technique a lot of the time when it came to fighting. It was just keep smacking them, and looking back, I could have been a lot more strategic about how I fought things, especially later on when I moved to Australia. Might have been a bit more successful. I might not have enjoyed it as much though, but that's all right.
Yeah, and that's probably one thing that I really liked about your style, was the fact that you're a very walk forward fighter.
Yeah. I'd say that's exactly how I liked it, and that comes from the karate days too, where you've only got one round in a karate fight to show to the judges that you've dominating the person, or to try and knock the person out, or if it's a point sparring tournament, to try and get points on them. You have to be attacking. So it came from that as well, just that whole mindset of just constantly going forward, constantly attacking.
And was there anything from when you were fighting, or when you watched any fights, where you'd be able to advise anyone, or what kind of advice would you give to like someone just getting into kickboxing?
The first and most important thing is it's much harder than you think. If you're not used to it, the training, you cannot train hard enough. When you've been training for 5 years, 5 times a week, a couple of times a day, then you can start thinking about, I'm training really hard. But if you're not training anywhere near that hard, then you're not training hard enough. That's the same for UFC, for MMA, for any top competitive sport, whether it's even basketball or rugby or whatever the sport may be. You've got to be training super hard all the time. Bearing in mind, of course, you've got to have your rest days, but that could be 1 day a week rest day, especially when you're young and 16, 17, 18 years old. You've got 10 years of being able to train just flat out before you really start burning out. So, that's my big advice, is to just train harder. Don't think you're training hard enough, because chances are, if you think you're training hard enough, you're not. Really, that's the main thing.
And that's probably the best thing that I've heard in the interviews that I've done, because a lot of guys will probably finish their training when they could have done a bit more.
Yeah.
Or even my theory, my coaches always say, leave everything on the mat.
Yeah, exactly. Dog's going off in the background. Yeah, no, that's it, mate. Leave it all on. Cookie, shut up. Yeah, that's it, mate. Leave everything on the floor. Leave everything on the dojo floor. Leave everything on the ring, or wherever you happen to be training. If it's even just going for a run. When I was running as part of my endurance base, I wouldn't get home and feel good about it. I'd get home and feel wrecked. Just every time.
But do you think that mental toughness that you kind of calloused your mind just throughout, a day-to-day basis, you were able to take it to the ring? So.
Oh yeah. It's an accumulation of years and years of that mental toughness to be able to get to that stage. And the people that reach the top, they have that mental toughness from an early age. It's a bit, I guess it can be a little bit of sort of upbringing, and a little bit of genetics, and a little bit of what your influences have had in your life, but right from when I started karate when I was 12, I always had I don't know where it came from, if it was installed in me by my senpais and my senseis or my seniors, just to always give it your best. It was a bit of that, and it was a bit of myself wanting to be always improving and always wanting to get fit. But right from then, like you say, it's that callousing of the mind to be able to really push yourself on whatever you do. Absolutely.
Especially with the Kyokushin and a lot of the karate that you did. When you do low kicks and stuff, you're not wearing pads. That's traditional karate.
Yeah, exactly.
And even though you can't punch to the face, it's still the punches of the stomach are bare fist.
Oh yeah. No, it's I know I came away from the tournament in Auckland, the Kyokushin Open tournament. I couldn't walk on one leg for ages because I had I was actually got a massive hematoma on my shin, actually in the Ethan Shepp fight. That's why I ended up punching him, because my shin was completely wrecked. And I actually carried that injury for the rest of my kickboxing career. When I fought 4 or 5 years later, I always had this hot spot on my shin, which was I had to put padding over and hit it underneath sort of ankle pads. In kickboxing, I had carried that into the Kyokushin tournament as well. And then I ended up having to just punch in the Kyokushin tournament and actually knocked the guy down with a punch in the stomach, which was pretty satisfying. But that was after I kicked him in the shin, and I ended up falling over because my shin was in such pain from this hot spot from fighting Ethan. But, that mental toughness of the pain tolerance as well. A lot of people don't have that. They might be fit, but they can't handle getting hit, or they can't handle things that go wrong. There's so many aspects to it, really.
And that's what I find very interesting with your background is, because like with the traditional martial arts side of things, like you have to have that mental toughness, or you can't really survive it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we in the tournaments, in the training for karate, we would be given impossible tasks that we wouldn't be able to complete, but we had to keep trying and trying and trying, and it might have been a circuit where you'd double the push-ups, so 1, 2, 8, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and the last set would be 64 push-ups after everything else. So you're barely moving your arms at the end of it. You certainly can't do full push-ups, but it wasn't about completing the full push-up. That was not what it was about at all. It was about never giving up. That was the whole aspect of it. So that's where that whole training drive came from. Never give up on it, and you'll do a lot better, really.
And I guess that's what I find interesting, because fighters from your era, there was no such thing as like a what people call now a fight camp. Where fight coming up and they'll start training a bit harder because they've got a fight.
Exactly right. Now they go into 3 months, do a 12-week block specifically for a fight. But I think that's an evolution too, because there's so many more people wanting to do it, and the peak gets higher, so you're going to have to train smarter and harder. So you have to do these fight camps to be able to climb the ladder, so to speak. It's a lot harder now with the top guys now. I think most of them would easily beat the top guys from 20 years ago, just with the smarts and the science behind the training and everything like that.
But a lot of the guys now too, Mike, is kind of what I was talking to you before about the difference from when you were living in New Zealand to Auckland. A lot of guys now, like I know a few too, like fully professional fighters, sponsorships.
Yeah.
They get a salary to fight.
Yeah, no, that's if there's only one thing that I wish was a little bit different, that was if I was 20 now. If I was 20 years old now getting into fighting, it would be so much different. But that's the only thing I really think about. But I've got no regrets about anything to do with the time. It's just that's the time you're there. I just started to get into a little bit of UFC right back when it really first started taking off, and then I was too old to really worry about training that hard for it. But that would have been a bit of fun too, getting into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and things. But I know Troy's had a few injuries, and I know another mate here that's had a few injuries from that sort of thing, and arm bars and stuff like that. So that side of things doesn't really appeal to me. I actually just watched the Frank Mir versus I can't remember who it was, fight, just a replay of it where he actually broke the guy's arm doing a Kimura.
Tim Sylvia.
Yeah, so I just watched that as a replay because there's no live UFC or not much of it. So I just thought, that doesn't look very much fun. Doesn't look fun.
But no, it's so interesting because, guys like you and Ethan, especially in New Zealand and Australia, you guys kind of paved the way for fighting, for what it is now.
Oh, good. I never.
That's my opinion anyway.
I never really looked back upon because again, like I said earlier, I wasn't a student of the game, and even now I don't follow it as far as I watch a little bit of it if I see it on TV or on Sky or something like that. I might have a bit of a look, but in general, I just don't follow particularly any people because the main thing is I just find most of the time it's a bit boring because people don't fight the way I used to fight. So, if there's a real two guys standing off and not doing much with each other, I just go, I just don't want to watch it. So,
and I was talking to Ethan about this recently because I got a fighter for him, and Ethan was saying, hopefully they're exciting because when I saw his fight with you, when you guys used to fight like that, of course you're going to know what exciting fights are about.
Yeah.
So, I think these days it's a lot different. And I guess with the development and coaching and things like that and the environment and technology and stuff. But I just think a lot of fighters worry too much about getting hit versus actually trying to hit their opponent.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
I remember just a little story about a guy when I was doing Seido karate back in the mid 80s, and I was 15, 16, 17 years old at the time, and he was a grown man, and he was probably 15 kilo heavier than I was. I was a pretty skinny little kid, and you weren't allowed to spar full out until you were a green belt at Seido karate at the time, and he was a blue belt and then yellow belt, and he was always going, I can't wait to fight, I'm gonna, and he's a big barrel-chested 25-year-old guy, and he actually gave up not long after he got his green belt, even though he didn't really get hit, because he suddenly thought, hang on a minute, I'm actually getting hit and I don't like it. So they certainly so it's interesting. But I guess
it's a lot different because training for fitness versus training to be a fighter are two completely different things.
No, it's a different headspace. If you train smart when you're training and fighting, and you've got to trust yourself that you're going to be able to block the punch or block the kick or check or defend against the attempted takedown, or you've got to trust yourself that you've done these things. And if they fail when you're fighting, then that's when you go back and you look at your training again and go, okay, well, I've got to work at my guard in this area, or I've got to do something that's going to improve that aspect of it. So that self-improvement circle was another thing that was always big in my mind. So I always, when I was fully involved in it, got back, and every fight I'd look back and go, okay, well, I actually had my guard down in that particular aspect. If that guy was smart, he would have kicked me in the head at that stage, or I didn't move my feet correctly in this situation, I should have spun around to the right and thrown a right overhand. Or I always went back and looked at my fights at the time and just keep trying to improve myself that way as well. So
that's so it's good that you were very self-aware.
Exactly.
There's a lot of fighters, I'm not sure if you've met many, but there are a lot of fighters that rely on their coach or rely on people around them to give them cues when they're fighting.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I saw that when I shifted to Melbourne, in the gym there, I was always very critical of myself, being my own worst critic, as well as having some good coaches there that could point me in the right direction. But I think that comes from not just the Seido karate sort of traditional background, because there's plenty of people there that are very fit, but they're not very self-analytical. And it's something that was within me to always look at myself and, just doing kata demonstrations and always videoing myself and looking about where I'm going and what I'm doing when I'm moving. That's just always something I've done in that aspect. So that transferred over into fighting. And plus, when I moved to Motueka, I basically had to train myself anyway, because I could only get to Nelson a couple of times a week where the kickboxing trainer was. So when I lived in, that didn't happen a lot. And then when I trained myself for tournaments in Nelson, there was nobody there that could really train me for karate tournaments, because I was sort of the senior person that was doing the training for tournaments. A lot of the other people that were the same grade as me, they weren't interested in doing tournaments and stuff like that. So I always had to train myself a lot of the time. So that's where that comes from too.
Yeah, that's like very, very rare, because a lot, like these days, how many sparring partners do guys have? How many people do the fighters have access to? Like I've sent girls from Australia to be sparring partners for a girl in Japan, because they wanted people like that.
Yeah,
it's just so different now. And I guess like for you, it was one of those things where you were in situations where you had to do it yourself.
Yeah, exactly right.
And
I liked
it does make me think. It does make me think, Mike. Like, imagine if you had all those people around you at that time. That's just always a thought,
Oh, no, I think about that too. What if, I was in that situation, but, you can't do much about that, obviously. So, just take it as it comes. It was good times, but...
Yeah, so when you were in that situation of, like, kind of training yourself, how did you find it to motivate yourself? I mean, because you had to motivate yourself to do pretty much everything in terms of training.
Well, I was lucky enough that there was some guys that I trained with in karate that were the same age as me. They weren't the same grade as me, but they were the same age as me, and they loved training hard. And although I was much more senior to them as far as a rank is concerned and had a lot more experience than them, they still loved to get out there and do the hard training. So it was always fun going to training with those guys, and we'd be doing circuits and doing sparring and stuff like that. There's always other people that would just as keen to train really hard as I was at the time. So when we did our circuit work and our fitness work, that was always a good time. We'd have the radio blasting, doing circuits in the karate club and stuff like that. That was so that's even going to Nelson. There was always people in Nelson that were young and fit and wanted to train really, really hard. So the motivation to train hard, although I still had a lot of it internally, there was still other people around me which would drive me as well, which always helped, definitely helped.
Yeah, and I think like that old saying of iron sharpens iron.
Yeah, exactly right.
And like if you've got, you'll know as a teacher, if you've got focused people around focused people, they're going to go far.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And it's different if you've got someone who can't be bothered being there.
Yeah.
Because with fighting, I think it's kind of like a lesson where you have to be mentally present to be able to absorb everything at that point in time.
Yeah, exactly right.
And if you're not mentally present, you get hurt.
Well, exactly right. And that's exactly what happened in my last fight. I took it a little bit easy, a bit casual when I went into it, and wasn't completely focused on being right in the game the whole time. And it can easily happen, and that's see it. I occasionally watch some stuff on telly and stuff, and you see it even with top professional fighters that if they're not onto it, if they're a bit tired, they're a bit worn out mentally, then it is terribly easy to get hurt, and it's pretty unforgiving. The fight game. If you're not onto it and you're fighting somebody that's good, they'll knock you out as quick as look at you, really. But the other aspect of that, which is a little bit different, and I sort of make this a comparison a lot to myself, is people that are fighting generally want to be there. They want to be training in the club. So most people are starting from a base which is pretty high compared to your average, Joe Blow out in the public. So I think most people that have never had anything to do with fighting, or they might have seen it, but have never trained or anything, been in an environment like that, they really got no idea what sort of base, like going back to that guy who gave up when he started sparring because it wasn't what he thought it would be. I think most people in the world would be like that, really. They've got no real idea what fighters go through.
Yeah, and I guess like a lot of my sessions are kind of like that. And as an example, you know, like we had a couple guys turn up late to training, and our coach got them to do 200 squat jumps on the spot in front of everyone.
Yeah.
And, you know, he said, if they come back, you know they're keen.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right.
You know,
exactly
and I think because Carl's got a background in traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So even though he's MMA, he's still got that very traditional approach.
No, that's it. They didn't, you know, it wasn't like I said earlier, it's not about completing absolutely everything to the top of your ability. It's about never quitting. That's the thing, which is, you know, that's always been my philosophy.
And that, it's pretty common because obviously Carl's trained a lot of champions and things like that, and he always says that when we're hitting the bag, you know, he just says, imagine it's the last 20 seconds, you've got the guy up against the ropes, and it's either you or him. Who's it going to be? Yeah,
that's exactly right. Exactly right. You know, if I had put myself in situations when I was training, I sometimes didn't think about that aspect of actually fighting when I was training. My training, I always thought about training really hard, but I didn't imagine myself fighting when I was hitting the bags and hitting the pads. So that was one aspect of my own thought process that could have been adjusted, but you know, that's all right. Because I was always hitting the bag and the pads as hard as I could, the coach never said to me, think about the bag as being your opponent. I always thought about the bag as something just to get fit hitting. So, you know, that's the one little thing there that people could think about when they're when they are hitting the bag, is like you say, it's the opponent you're hitting, it's not the bag, which is a good mind trick.
Yeah, and I guess that leads me to one of my last questions. Did you have any kind of like mental training, or like did you like do any visualizing or goal setting, just in terms of like your week to week stuff, or did you just rock up and just do it?
I tried to set myself like short term goals, like periodizing the training and, you know, getting up to a peak and then having a slower week, and sort of that aspect of it. I never got into really any mindfulness thinking about, you know, calming the brain and, you know, sort of stuff nowadays. And well, not nowadays, I should say. Some people have got some that have helped them for no real reason. It's not that I didn't like doing stuff like that. It was just never something that occurred to me. Like I said earlier, my goals were always, okay, today I'm going to train really hard. That was basically it. Whatever the training is, I was just going to do it.
And that's, because I had a very similar talk with Peter Graham about that, and he just told me, you know, he said, very similar to you, he said he just used to rock up to training and he used to fight, and he said that was it.
No, it wasn't. And you know, some people might really get motivated by having some quiet, motivational sort of mindfulness, and it probably is something that could probably have helped me back in the day, but it was just something that never really occurred to me.
Because when you guys train in Seido, do you guys ever do moksol or like?
Yeah. Every class we had to do a slight little meditation at the start and at the end of every class. And it was really only for 10 seconds or 15 seconds or so. When we got to more senior ranks, we did do a little bit more, not guided meditation, but more quiet meditation, where you might have had to sit in Caesar for 15 minutes with your eyes closed, and just concentrate on your breath and things like that. But it wasn't really a mainstay of what we had to do. Well, I saw the advantages of it, you know, clearing the mind and stuff like that.
And I think personally, because I do it as well, we have to do it at every training. I just feel like it clears your mind, but it also allows you to appreciate where you are and be present.
Yeah, exactly right. It does. And it's interesting that doesn't transfer. You don't see that sort of thing happen in a UFC gym or a kickboxing class or anything like that. You know, you basically just get in there and you start warming up and you're into it. Yeah. So, you know, I don't know if getting a bit of quiet time and getting the guys around in a circle, or just getting them to close people to close their eyes and just think about what they're going to do for the class before they start. You know, that might be something that could be useful for them. Who knows? They might not like it. They might just want to get in there and whack stuff.
Yeah, because I think a lot of the training, and when I see a lot of that stuff, is I think a lot of the traditional side, like the Moxel and things like that, could benefit a lot of the people who don't know how to control their mind around the fight or training.
That's probably good for a lot of people that don't want to fight and don't want to train, just people to be able to sit down in society in general and just sit down and just have a relax and just, contemplate and things like that could probably help some people, especially at the moment where some people anyway are a bit stressed about the current situation and on lockdown and stuff like that, just to be able to calm their minds and just be a bit more appreciative of what's around them and things like that. So I think most people I've seen have been pretty relaxed about most things that go on in their lives. So, you have people that get wound up, they're going to get wound up regardless of whether they're in lockdown or if they're out on the street or out at the pub on a Friday night having a few beers. They're the people that are going to get wound up anyway. So they're the ones that probably could do with a bit more training and a bit more moxol, as you say.
Yeah, and what I find funny, and I'm not sure what it was like when you were fighting professionally, but you'll go to the local pub on a Sunday when the UFC's on or something, or kickboxing.
Yeah.
Everyone turns into an expert after a couple of beers.
I've only actually been a couple of times. I went to watch a boxing fight when boxing was still when boxing was quite big. It was actually I can't remember. It was a big fight in England, and it was broadcast live here. I think it was an Australian guy fighting. It was a few years ago. It's back in 2005 or something like that. And it was an Aussie guy fighting an English guy, and there was at the end of the fight the Aussie guy got beaten, and the Aussie guys were throwing chairs in the middle of the bar to the British fans that were at the bar, and it was just a family place down the road. It was just a family restaurant bar type thing, and I thought, it's just, it doesn't, one thing that's always sort of amused me is not just the fans, but it's also the banter that you have fighters doing and all the pre-fight garbage. Like, you have people what's Conor McGregor and people and Nurmagomedov, or I can't remember how to pronounce his name. They're always on TV or they're tweeting and they're trying to amp each other up. And I'm always, and Anthony Mundine was huge for it here, and it's just, why do they need to do that? And I understand in one aspect they want to get either people hating them or loving them because they're going to buy tickets. They're going to sell tickets.
It's a promotion thing. It's a marketing thing.
And being a traditional martial artist, it was always the humbleness of the person was a real strength of character. It wasn't about big noting and all sorts of stuff like that. That's always sort of frustrated me. I totally understand the marketing aspect of it, but then when push comes to shove and Habib's father died the other week, and then Conor McGregor put out a really nice tweet about sorry to hear that and blah blah blah, and then next week they're back to abusing the hell out of each other to get the ratings up for whenever they might fight again. It just seems too contrived and not really in the spirit of what I think fighting should be about. And
I do agree with you, especially because I promote fighters and I manage fighters. I always tell them, because I send like pretty much all my fighters are from Australia.
Yeah,
and I send them to Japan, and knowing the Japanese culture, from your karate background, they have to be humble. Like their press conferences are nothing like what you'll see in the UFC.
No, that's right.
Because all those guys, like 90% of those guys come from traditional backgrounds.
Yeah. And that's what it's about. And then you get the Japanese culture, right from thousands of years ago, is always about that. You stay reserved, you keep within yourself. And funnily enough, I think in some aspects that's actually been detrimental to myself, because I always had to constrain and hold back my emotions when I was in that situation.
Yeah.
So although at one hand it's made me very focused and very humble about a lot of things, sometimes it's made me think, well, what if I did let go a little bit more? It wasn't so controlled about everything, what would have happened then? But, that's just another thing. There's a bit of balance there, I think, that needs to happen.
When you used to go into a fight, like I remember talking to Peter Graham about it, and we were talking about Mark Hunt, and he said Mark Hunt wrote in his book that he never felt anything when he would fight.
Yeah.
He'd just be present.
Yeah.
Did you feel anything like anger or anything like that?
No, I never did. I never felt angry at any. It was always just, okay, where is the opening? And if I was going to feel anything, it was if something hit me so hard that it made me feel pain, in which case if it was super bad, then, I might show it on my face, but otherwise it's just, okay, that's hurt, and put that in the back and we'll keep on going. Or if I got really exhausted and I was just getting, just gassing out, they're the only two things I ever felt when I was fighting. I never felt anger or frustration or, tension about wanting to hurt the guy, or I never went out there to specifically, I'm going to go and punch this guy in the head and knock his freaking block off. I never ever thought like that. It was always, okay, where's the next punch coming from? Let's just try and work it through that way.
And that's what I think. I saw it somewhere. I think Joe Rogan was talking about it. You got those two different fighters, the ones that look for the knockout versus the ones that let the knockout come to them.
Yeah. And if you're exceptionally talented and you've got lightning fast hands and everything like that, then you could look for the knockout. You could look for the timing and the opening of it. But in general, I think most people would be better served to be able to just trust themselves and trust their training and be instinctive in the ring. If you're not instinctive,
sure.
If you're going to be, it's going to be too visible what you're trying to do. You see boxing guys all the time, more specifically in boxing, but probably in UFC and stuff like that as well. If they're going for the knockout, they're not going to get it. Unless the guy's already wobbled and he's already hurt.
Yeah.
If you're going and swinging, you're tensing up and you're blowing energy out. You just, it's not going to work.
And that's what I think I liked about your fights is you were always relaxed. You could see. But then when there was an opening, you'd match it and you'd do it. Like Mike Zambidis' fight is a perfect example. As you know, he's a knockout artist until you knocked him out as well. But very, very fast hands, and he would come out swinging.
Yeah, exactly.
He's the type of fighter who would look for it.
Yeah, and he had the power to be able to back it up. Most people he could just blast through because he was so strong. And I think maybe his reputation preceded him a lot of the time as well. He'd fight people and they would be a bit like, especially in Australia, he wasn't. He did a lot more work later on. But when he first, I think there was a few people that were intimidated by his power. Being a little sort of a miniature Mike Tyson type guy with a similar sort of build and a similar comparative sort of strength of punching and things like that. But everyone can be hurt and everyone has a weakness, and his weakness was he'd never really fought knees before, and that's good luck to me, I say.
Yeah, and that's what I think. What I really liked about that fight is you ended it pretty quick.
Yeah, well, the weakness I knew was weakness. And his trainer and my trainer Nick Cara knew each other. They're both Greek guys here, and his trainer really was disappointed that he drew me in the first round of that tournament because he knew that I was a really strong knee fighter, and he knew Zambidis wasn't, and he'd never really dealt with it before, so he had no idea what to do. I mean, he improved from that because he fought later on. He got better at knee fighting, and being so short, he had to get better at knee fight or better at knees and being able to sort of counteract the knees. But when I fought him, he didn't have it. So you got to know your strengths and weaknesses of your opponent if you can. I mean, that was about the first time I'd ever really thought about somebody's weaknesses before fighting them.
Yeah.
And it worked out well.
Yeah, and it just goes to highlight the fact that you have to get them to play in your game.
Yeah, exactly right. And I'd be stupid to stand out and stand in punching range and try and mix it up with a guy like that. You either get right out and try and kick him, or you get right in and grab him. So standing in the middle is the stupidest thing you could do. So, you have to, like you say, you have to know your battles and go for your strengths and his weaknesses.
Yeah, and that's where I think it's so good hearing that from you, because I think styles make fights,
Yeah.
a lot of people would have seen someone like Mike Zambidis, like you said, and they would have gone, "Oh no, I got to watch out for his hands." But instead of watching out for his hands, you focused on what you can do.
Yeah, exactly right. I just trust my guard, and when he rocked me, it's a good shot, but it wasn't on my jaw, so it just sort of stunned me a bit. You had to make sure you keep your hands up, and if you do that and just work your way in right and close to him, he wasn't going to be able to do it. So, it's good.
So, in closing, Mike, do you have any advice, I guess, for like just anyone coming from a traditional background wanting to get into either MMA or kickboxing or boxing?
Look, just jump in, do it. Just train real hard. It can open some doors. You might be able to, go around and see some places that you've never been able to go to before. Because I was quite broke when I was growing up, not a lot of money and stuff like that. So, although that was never a goal of mine to see different places, it really opened up some doors. There's plenty of good people involved in it, and if you're thinking about doing it, just go and do it. It's why stop? Why hold back? Don't get to be 35 and go, you know what, I wished I had did this. If you're 18, 20, 25 now's the time to get in there and just go, I'll give it a go. Just give it a go, What can go wrong?
Yeah, that's awesome, because I think more people do need that mentality.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if you're dabbling in it, and you're thinking, oh, I wish this or I wish that.
No, that's awesome, Mike. And hopefully I'll be able to grab some photos of you to chuck up as well.
Yeah, I've just got my photo albums out right beside me here, actually. I'll just scan them and send them through to you on email, if that's all right, and dig out a few there. It's got me fighting Ethan, and it's got me meeting Costa Zoo after I got beaten up by Sakio Bika in my first boxing fight. That was pretty good.
That was a tough draw for a first boxing fight.
Oh, yeah. Cracked rib, broken nose, But he did 150 amateur fights and about half a dozen pro boxing fights, and that's all he'd ever done, never done anything else. And that was my first boxing fight, so, that's all right. What are you going to do?
Kind of how it goes, but I really appreciate your time, Mike.
No problems at all, mate. It's been enjoyable.
Yeah, and I'll let you know when the video's up, and we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, excellent. Good work. Cheers, heaps.